Hello, welcome to HITC Sport. Right, a few days ago I took a look at every country from the 2014 World Cup and the most unlikely transfers since then. Well, let's go back 10 years now to the 2010 World Cup and find every team's player who went on to sign for a club who you'd never predicted back then. France, Nicolas Anelka, West Brom. Okay lads, there's a few I could choose from here, like Thierry Henry winding up in the MLS, Steve Mandanda signing for Crystal Palace, or even the French team captain one day ending up in the clown circus of West Ham. But no, the real answer here is without a doubt Nicolas Anelka. Yeah, this was the tournament which ended his international career, but he was on the books of Chelsea at the time, and he was just 1 year out from winning the Premier League Golden Boot. Sure, the man swaps jobs every 6.5 minutes. His career had all the stability of a Peter-Andre marriage, but did anyone predict West Brom? You would assume this man had already had his fill of slumming at below-par clubs, wasting time for unfashionable teams so far below his level. Surely Chelsea was going to be his last job in English football, especially considering back in 2010, West Brom had just been promoted from the Championship, with their top scorer being Chris Brunt, and Anelka to the Hawthorns. It would be like nowadays predicting Olivier Giroud to wind up at, well, the Hawthorns. Mexico, Carlos Vela, Los Angeles FC. Okay, there's one obvious standout answer here. Back in 2010, Carlos Vela was a 21-year-old striker on the books of Arsenal. The man was tipped to make the breakthrough, become the next big thing at the Emirates. So, predicting he'd wind up at Los Angeles FC, an MLS brand that didn't even exist until 4 years after the World Cup, I guarantee not a man, woman and child on the planet would have seen that one coming. I mean, how could they? South Africa, Stephen Pienaar, Sunderland. Okay, without a doubt, the answer here is Stephen Pienaar, who back in 2010 was South Africa's best player. Not just that, he was excelling for Everton under David Moyes, had spent his entire career being linked with the likes of Man United, Arsenal and Spurs. In his homeland, the guy was a virtual superstar. So I'm guessing a sad and lonely relegation with Sunderland probably wasn't in his plans back in 2010. Uruguay, Martin Caceres, Southampton. The answer here is Martin Caceres, who's a highly rated 23-year-old defender having already played for Barcelona, Juventus and Sevilla. He was probably prepared for a career of Champions League football, and Southampton at the time had just finished 7th in League One. Tell him he'd instead one day sign for them, he'd probably feel like ripping off his own face. Argentina, Jonas Gutierrez, Norwich. Yeah, this is the tournament where Diego Maradona hailed Jonas Gutierrez as the second most important player in his team. Seems a bit mental. Sure, he was a good mid-table winger for Newcastle, but nothing special. And Argentina were playing him at right back. It didn't make sense. I suppose being told you're more important than Sergio Aguero, Carlos Tevez and Angel Di Maria by one of the greatest footballers to ever live, it must have been a great confidence boost. And again, Norwich City had just spent the season in League One, opening the season with a 7-1 home defeat to Colchester. So the second most important Argentinian footballer probably didn't envision ever playing for them. Greece, Sotiris Ninis, Hapoel Eshkelon FC. Yeah, back in 2010, Sotiris Ninis was a 20-year-old Greek wonder kid. He was a winger for Panathinaikos and was billed as one of the best young footballers on the planet. Man United, Chelsea, Real Madrid, these were the sort of clubs he might have hoped to play for. Not to be 29 years old and signing for Hapoel Eshkelon FC out the back arse of Israel. Nigeria, Peter ODEMWINGIE, Rotherham. Yeah, good old Peter ODEMWINGIE. Back in 2010 he was 28 years old, had played European football with both Lille and Spartak Moscow, and was being linked to the Premier League move to West Brom. The guy was a damn good player at the time, a 15-goal a season goal scorer whose negotiation tactics involved creepily waiting outside the club of his choosing in a parked car. Bit weird, Peter. Sounds like the type of activity which is going to get you on some register. Anyway, back in 2010, Rotherham just finished 5th in League 2. I'm guessing back then he didn't have a clue who they were. South Korea, Park Ji-sung QPR. Yeah, even looking back on this now, it's ridiculous. Back in 2010, Park Ji-sung was the 29-year-old captain of South Korea and playing the biggest games in football with Man United. He'd last half a decade at Old Trafford. Most assumed when he'd finally leave, he'd be back to PSV or Asia, not QPR. Especially considering to the 09-10 season they were an utter joke, going through 4 managers, finishing 13th in the Championship and eliminated from both domestic cups in the 3rd round. To be signing Park Ji-sung within 2 years, it wouldn't make sense. Algeria, HASSAN, YEBDA, Udinese. Okay, HASSAN YEBDA just spent the season on loan at Portsmouth, finishing bottom of the league and just being an all-round flop. Udinese at the time were an exciting Serie A team with some real good players like Alexis Sanchez. So YEBDA winding up there on loan within 4 years, it seemed a bit unlikely. England, Wayne Rooney, Derby County. Okay, there's a few I could choose for England. Back in 2010, it would almost be unthinkable that Frank Lampard would one day wear the blue of Manchester City. Offering that prospect back then, and he'd probably get sick in his mouth. Similarly, Rob Green, after becoming the World Cup's biggest joke against USA, to think he'd one day be signing for Chelsea after that? Just what? But no, the answer is Wayne Rooney, who back in 2010 was only 24 years old, and he'd soon be handing in transfer requests at Old Trafford, getting linked to the best teams on the planet. Derby County, by contrast, were a mid-table championship team recovering from the most embarrassing existence ever seen in Premier League history. To think they'd one day have a shot at Rooney, it's like tipping Sunderland to sign Raheem Sterling within the next 10 years. Not a chance in hell. Slovenia, SAMIR Handanovic, Inter Milan. There's no real surprises in the Slovenian squad. I suppose SAMIR Handanovic was a comfortably good goalkeeper in Udinese at the time. Inter Milan, by contrast, were the champions of Europe. With Julio Cesar, they looked like they'd be settled in goal for a while, probably for the next decade. So Handanovic, it looked like they didn't need him. Maybe this wasn't too surprising, but there's not too many options for Slovenia. USA, Michael Bradley, Roma. Yeah, Roma have a nasty habit of trying to sign woefully bang-average footballers. Remember when they almost dragged in Jack Rodwell? Just what? Michael Bradley was another one. Sure, he was a young American footballer out in the Bundesliga with Borussia Mönchengladbach at the time, but Roma Really? To think one of the most historic clubs in European football would reduce themselves to signing something that crawled out of Bob Bradley's nutsack. Australia, Mark Schwarzer, Chelsea. No question marks over this one. Without a doubt, Mark Schwarzer. Sure, back in 2010 he just reached a Europa League final with Fulham. Great, but he's turning 38 years of age that year. Chelsea, the champions of England. Did anyone see him ever signing for them? No, he was almost as old as time itself. Germany, Marco Marin, Al Ahly. This was just massively underwhelming. Sure, Mesut Ozil was the next big thing coming through for Germany at the time, but Marco Marin wasn't too far behind. They played together in the same Werder Bremen front line, and at 21 years of age, he was seen as a German wonder kid destined for big things. No, instead, the best years of his career were swallowed whole in the lone dungeon at Stamford Bridge. In 2010, he was probably dreaming of Barcelona or Real Madrid, not to be wound up at Al Ahly in the back arse of Saudi Arabia. Good Christ. Ghana, Kevin Prince Boateng, Barcelona. Okay, yes, I mentioned this one in the other video, but still, who else am I gonna pick? Kevin Prince Boateng was a Tottenham flop, had just finished bottom of the league with Portsmouth and missed a penalty in the FA Cup final. Barcelona back in 2010 were arguably the best team on planet Earth. And yes, I realise Inter Milan won the Champions League that year. So predicting Boateng to sign for them 8 years down the line, oh no, just mental. Serbia, Nemanja Vidic, Inter Milan. Okay, again, this wouldn't have made sense in 2010. Back then, Nemanja Vidic was 28 years old, in the prime of his career, and arguably one of the top 5 centre-backs on the planet. The guy had spent 4 years at Old Trafford, was about to be named team captain. Yes, Inter Milan were the champions of Europe, but you'd have thought the only way he was ever leaving Man United would be to wind down his career at a lesser club, not force his way out to the Champions League winners. But by 2014, Inter Milan were that big step down. But nobody predicted their downfall back in 2010, so yeah, this would have looked weird. Cameroon, Samuel Eto'o, Everton. Okay, back in 2010, Samuel Eto'o looked like one of those world-class stars who was never going to play in the Premier League. He was 29, had just won back-to-back trebles with Barcelona and Inter Milan. Everton had just finished 8th in the league with David Moyes as boss, and were trying to wheel out a broken Louis Saha every week. For a club seemingly allergic to centre-forwards of any real quality, the prospect of one day getting their hands on a superstar and European champion like Eto'o, back in 2010 it looked damn unlikely. It's a bit like tipping Newcastle to one day sign Robert Lewandowski. Just no. Denmark, Christian Eriksen, Inter Milan. Okay lads, remember back in 2010, Inter Milan were the champions of Europe, the team to beat. They looked like they were about to embark on an era of utter dominance, a bit like Bayern Munich nowadays. Yes, Christian Eriksen was a talented playmaker coming through at Ajax, but lads, he was only 18 years of age. He hadn't done anything in football yet, so tipping him for Inter Milan, again, it would be like some current Ajax teenager to sign for Bayern. Japan, Keisuke Honda, Melbourne victory. Yeah, back in 2010, Keisuke Honda was one of the stars of the World Cup, linked with the likes of Man United and Arsenal. His eyes probably lit up at the prospect of swallowing big chunks of cash for the rest of his life. To be fair, he did spend 3 years at a stagnated AC Milan, but moving to Australia with Melbourne victory, was this really the big superstar move? Netherlands, Robin van Persie, Man United. Okay lads, the prospect of Robin van Persie ever swapping Arsenal for Man United looked non-existent 10 years ago. He just had yet another injury-hit year for Arsenal, playing just 20 games in all competitions. He was yet to have that big burst of form, that breakout year. Ever since Thierry Henry's departure, he'd been massively outshined by Emmanuel Adebayor, and considering he was entering his 7th season at the club, Sir Alex Ferguson wouldn't even have been sniffing in this guy's direction. So yeah, unpredictable move back then. Italy, Gianluigi Buffon, PSG. Okay, I'm sorry. Gianluigi Buffon to PSG would have made 0 sense to anyone on the planet back in 2010. Sure, you might understand now why he'd have cut short a 17-year relationship with Juventus to spend a year cramming his face with money on the bench of PSG, but 10 years ago, there was no money. They just finished 13th in League One. And Buffon, while a reigning world champion, had spent a year proving his loyalty to Juventus in Serie B with Boomsong in his defence. If he was willing to go through all that, travelling to tin pot stadiums that smelt of dog piss, if he was willing to do that for Juventus, you'd think he was there to stay for life. So one day ending up at what was then a mid-table French club, just no. New Zealand, Ryan Nelsen, Tottenham. Okay, this sliding was weird when it happened. Back in 2010, the New Zealand captain was unfashionable centre-half Ryan Nelsen, who was a comfortably mid-table defender at Blackburn. Tottenham was the exciting up-and-coming team who just qualified for the Champions League. Considering Nelsen was 32 years of age, the guy was probably concentrating on clinging to his job at Ewood Park. So a move to ambitious Tottenham, it couldn't have looked further away from happening back in 2010. He was old as balls. Paraguay, Lucas Barrios, Guangzhou, Evergrande. Okay, forget Lewandowski. Lucas Barrios was supposed to be the superstar coming through at Borussia Dortmund. The Paraguayan striker just smashed home 19 Bundesliga goals during the 09-10 season. At 25, at the peak of his powers, the guy had half of Europe's elite clubs eating out of his agent's hand. So tell him that when he did quit Dortmund, it would be for Guangzhou Evergrande out in China. Oh, it would be all kinds of underwhelming. Slovakia, Marek Hamšík, Dalian professional. Similarly, back in 2010, Marek Hamšík was captain of Slovakia at 22 years of age. He just ripped Serie A apart for Napoli and was linked with most big clubs on the planet. So tell him that when he did leave Italy, it would be for Dalian professional out in China. Just no. What about the moves to Man United or Man City? Brazil, Julio Cesar, QPR. Arguably the weirdest one in the list. Back in 2010, it was generally acknowledged that Julio Cesar was the world's best goalkeeper. He was almost unbeatable standing between the six for Inter Milan, had just hoovered up every trophy available to him, and was Brazil's #1. Did anyone think he was 2 years off signing for QPR? Anyone? Again, that crazy championship club who just fired 4 managers and were a complete and utter mess. They had Paddy King in goal. Upgrading to Julio Cesar, at the time the world's best shot stopper, oh, just a mental move. Ivory Coast, Yaya Toure, King Dao Hung Ai. Okay, I know Yaya Toure was 27, but he was yet to hit his peak back in 2010. He was tying up a big money switch from Barcelona to Man City. Again, his most recent club was King Dao Hung Ai, a Chinese club that didn't even exist until 2013. So not a single breathing soul on the planet could have foreseen that move coming. It would be impossible. North Korea, YONG-JO, 25th of April. Considering most of the North Korean squad played in North Korea, you'd think YONG-JO, one of the only few playing abroad with Rostov in Russia, he might have gone on to have a career travelling the globe, instead of winding up back home after the World Cup with a military-owned club called 25th of April. What a weird name for a football team. Portugal, Cristiano Ronaldo, Juventus. Okay, yes lads, Juventus were still a massive club back in 2010, but they were on a long road to recovery after relegation, like a rehabilitating alcoholic. They just finished 7th in Serie A, nearly 30 points off the title, and had just been dumped out of the Europa League, losing 4-1 at Fulham. Telling Cristiano Ronaldo that his next career move will be to them is like tipping Kylian Mbappe to one day leave PSG for AC Milan. Bit underwhelming. Chile, Claudio Bravo, Man City. Okay, this couldn't have looked further away from happening back in 2010. Claudio Bravo was 27 years of age and had just won promotion back to the Spanish top flight with Real Sociedad. His only ever season in European top flight football had ended with an embarrassing relegation, and City at the time were already blessed with 2 top-class goalies in Shea Given and a young Joe Hart. Especially Hart, he looked like he had about 10 to 15 years left in him. So Bravo, one day getting a move to the Etihad, nah, it wouldn't have made an iota of sense. Honduras, Maynor Figueroa, Houston Dynamo. Ah yes, the Wigan fullback who scored from his own half. Think anyone ever saw this Honduras left back ever winding up in Texas with Houston Dynamo? Anyone? Nah, me neither. Switzerland, Gökhan Inler, Leicester. You'd forget that Gökhan Inler played for Leicester City. Back in 2010 he was a 26-year-old midfielder for Udinese and linked with a bunch of big clubs. Leicester City by contrast had just finished 5th in the championship. Them signing Inler one day, oh, it looked a bit unrealistic, lads. Spain, Cesc Fabregas, Chelsea. Okay, I have to go with this one. 2010 was the year Cesc Fabregas was making noises about quitting Arsenal for Barcelona. According to him, he would never play for another English club. And I think the world believed him. Fabregas one day joining Chelsea. Honestly, ask most Arsenal fans back in 2010, they'd probably say there was 0% chance of that ever happening. Bit awkward. Anyway, that's the end of it, lads. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and as always, I'll talk to you in a while.